Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to our run-through of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. We are up to the penultimate episode of the second season. It's episode number 25. It is called Tribunal. It aired on June 5th, 1994. Written by Bill Dial. Directed by Avery Brooks, his first directorial chair assignment for Commander Sisko here. He would go on to direct a bunch more, but this is his very first one. It's called Tribunal. In this episode, when the Cardassians arrest Miles O'Brien for working with the Maquis, he's put on a Cardassian trial where the verdict is known before the trial begins. Guilty. We're joined by Modi. Modi, how are you?
How do you pick the episodes that you give me? Because it seems like you give me a lot of bad ones.
Did you? I don't think you... Well, I think that'll be... Maybe that'll be something to discuss, because I didn't think this one was all that bad. So that's interesting that you didn't like it all that much. I don't think this one's particularly great, but I think that it's interesting. I thought you were going to accuse me of giving you like an O'Brien bias, and I couldn't remember if I had given you...
Oh, that's true too. I got this last time I had the Troy bias. Now I got the O'Brien bias. I'm the O'Brienologist now.
Fit into slots. We're going to be talking about the Cardassians, their judicial system, O'Brien, cosmetic surgery, and I think a whole lot more. But outside of that, we're going to take a break. We're going to play an audio clip, and me and Modi are going to come back and we're going to break down Tribunal.
Don't worry. We haven't done anything.
Thank you for your cooperation. I have orders to arrest you, Mr. O'Brien.
Arrest?
Search the ship.
What are the charges?
You have the right to refuse to answer questions, but such refusal may be construed as a sign of guilt.
I demand to know what I'm being accused of.
You deny all knowledge of this crime, then?
How the hell am I supposed to deny something when I don't know what you're talking about?
So you do not deny all knowledge?
We are Federation citizens and we have rights.
Yes. All your rights, as defined by Cardassian articles of jurisprudence, will be protected.
It's funny. So you should lead off why you didn't think that this one was very good, because I think this one is maybe not the heights of season 2. It's probably not a top 5 or anything like that, but I think it's a fairly good, darkly comic exploration of the Cardassian system. I think of it more of an episode that really fleshes out Cardassia than anything else. But how about you? You let me know what you thought.
To me, I don't know. It felt like they were playing Calvin ball with the way that Cardassian political and criminal justice system works. It just kind of felt like they were making it up as they went along, and this is like the brand new lore they're introducing, how this whole thing works, and it's just a lot of wrapped up when you start analyzing their justice system there.
Yeah.
That doesn't like quite add up when you really think about it, I feel like. But I don't know. It just felt like they were just kind of making it up as it went along, which I know this is all fiction. None of this actually happened, but somebody's got to make it up at some point. It just, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it was thought through as much as other things in the show have been.
I think that maybe the issue with the episode is that it's trying very hard to be it's almost like a satire. Like it's not grounded in the universe of Deep Space Nine on some level. Like it feels like it's a little bit of a like an exaggeration and a detachment, and it feels a little bit like a play on in a lot of ways. It doesn't, to me, it's maybe the biggest problem with the episode is that the tone is a little bit inconsistent, because I think they probably could have gone for more of a dark comedy angle, which is what the trial is, but everything around the trial is not really that way. It's really just whenever they're in the courtroom, it's like that. But I mean, the processing sequence, like, what did you think of his processing sequence? Do you think that was you just tell me, what did you think
removing
about
teeth
that?
and the scanning they're doing, and strapping them down and all that? I mean, that was, I don't know. I mean, again, if they're going for the dark comedy route, then it doesn't. It feels a little too dark. It felt like that. God, I'm gonna forget that was the name of the episode. But the one where Picard is
Chain of Command
talking about yeah. It's just kind of like it had feelings of that, but in that scene, anyways. But other than that, it didn't. I think Cole Meany did a great job in this episode. I just don't know about the rest of it really.
Yeah, see, I think that it's different from Chain of Command, and because Chain of Command is like the serious version, and this feels like the goofy. Like I always kind of laugh during the processing scene with O'Brien, and I don't know if I'm supposed to. I don't know if that's supposed to be like really horrific, but just the way that they play it and the angles and everything and the quick cuts and the light in his eyes, and he looks terrible, and like he's being so slapped around, and they're tearing his teeth out and stuff. It strikes me as very over the top and goofy in a way that the Chain of Command torture scenes weren't. They felt more realistic and grounded. And
see, that's what I thought they were going for. But then now that you mention it, it does. Maybe that's what they're trying for. They're trying to make it echo that, but do it in a. I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're being fair to Cole Meany then. If this is like they're treating it not as seriously as the other situation, because I mean he seems like he's taking it very seriously and not playing it for laughs, and he keeps repeating that I'm Miles O'Brien. My rank is chief officer. He keeps repeating the exact same thing again and again.
Citizen of the Federation.
Citizen of the Federation again and again and again. But it doesn't have the same weight as it did before.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen someone do this before, obviously, and it's just didn't have the same weight when he was doing his lines there.
I mean, I think that a kind of a common weakness of the show and maybe the series and maybe the franchise in general is that the races like the Cardassians that are played off as this sort of state worshipping, torturing, authoritarian, fascist regime. The tone of Star Trek has a really hard time selling the seriousness of what they do as a people, like how horrible the Cardassians are. It doesn't. Because the show is like, PG rated basically, and they have to show it during syndication, and it's like for, young audiences. It's never really, it's funny to me because it's overt. Like they show you what they do to people, but it never comes across or feels like it really lands or sticks for me. Like it always seems a little bit
comically
goofy.
evil. Yeah, exactly.
So the problem there is this schism between the Cardassians are really sort of like in the sense of everything that they do, they're really terrible. They're terrible people, and this is a terrible society. But it never really sinks in for some reason. Like I have to think about why they're so bad because the show doesn't want to really revel in that badness. And I think that maybe this episode suffers a little bit from there because it takes it in that comic route, which I think would be necessary because if it wasn't somewhat funny, this episode would be just a far lesser version of Chain of Command, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So
I guess the humor of it didn't hit for me, I guess, was the problem. I wasn't looking at it as a dark comedy when I was watching it. I was like, oh, this is kind of stupid. That's what I was seeing it as.
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to take it, like I don't know, maybe if they didn't go far enough with the over the top 1984 kind of stuff they're doing. If they could have gone a little further with it, then maybe they could have done a satirical thing. I don't know if they're skewering, if it's a satire, though, is the thing. It's just so like it's not like communism exactly. It's not like other dictator regimes we've seen. It's just not like it's not far enough to be funny. It's not like a Dr. Strangelove kind of over the top kind of bureaucracy thing.
Oh, see,
I don't know.
I think I disagree just because I think the script is pretty funny and it's playing it pretty much like a joke. Like they have the line of, she's like, well, he's scheduled for his execution on Wednesday or whatever. And Keiko O'Brien is like, how can you schedule an execution before you've had the trial? And the Cardassian says, we believe in swift justice, which is a joke. See, that's a joke line.
I heard that line on the show and then I read it. And it was a lot funnier when I read it than when I heard it on the show. I don't know what that is. Maybe I was in the wrong mood when I watched this one. I was like, that's actually a pretty good line on paper. And that's pretty funny on paper. But it didn't hit for me, maybe. This delivery of it maybe didn't hit for me.
Interesting. Were you... I mean, I tend to sometimes suffer from watching episodes like that where if I'm not really aware of the tone that I think the episode maybe is eventually going for, I tend to watch it with the wrong glasses on or something the first time.
Yeah.
because
that is funnier on paper though.
That's true. I think if I watch this episode not taking it as a sort of like farce, I think it wouldn't be a very good episode, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's the problem with how I approached it when I first watched it here.
Yeah.
Now I went back through and I read the Memory Alpha wiki to prepare for this and that kind of thing. And I was reading those lines and I was like, this is actually funnier than when I saw it the last time. So
right.
Maybe that is something to that.
Because I think that my favorite part of the episode, besides the whole 1984 vibe, which I think is a good fit for the Cardassians, is the I forget what his role was, but basically O'Brien's lawyer is excellent.
Yes, that was pretty funny. Yeah,
he's a very good. I like the fact that he 100% believes in this. You know, there's no moment where he breaks and says like, "Oh, you're right. You've convinced me that I'm the error of my ways." He 100% believes in this. He's close to retirement. He doesn't want to stir the pot.
He's serving his purpose. Yeah, he's doing a good thing in what he's doing. Yeah, never once doubts the regime. So
I mean, what's your? Did you think that the episode didn't do a decent job of fleshing out the Cardassian civilization? This is the first time we've ever seen Cardassia Prime, interestingly.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. It's odd that we just all of a sudden just got dropped onto Cardassia Prime for the first time here.
Yeah.
That is I don't think we saw enough of it because it does feel very much like a bottle episode in certain ways because a lot of it takes place in the courtroom, which seems like a very, very small, confined space. It takes place in the shuttle and the runabout, and it takes place in his cell, which are all very tight, confined spaces, and there's not like a whole lot of idea of what the rest of Cardassia looks like.
Yeah.
Aside from the few exterior shots same exterior shot we saw a lot of times.
It's where apparently groups of 3 people stand around everywhere.
Yeah.
I think the architecture of Cardassia is interesting. It obviously is just kind of copying the space station architecture. They tend to like swooping arcs. That seems to be like a defining trait of Cardassian architecture. But it reminds me of, have you ever seen the movie, not Equilibrium? It's the one with Christian Bale, where he's the kung fu gunfighter.
Oh, yeah.
Is that Equilibrium? Let me check this. Hold on.
I mixed that one up and what is it, like X versus Sever or whatever it's called? That's the other one that I confuse it with.
It is.
Isn't it like another one called like Ballistic or something like that? Or that's the same one I'm thinking of.
That's with Antonio Banderas, right? This is
yeah.
Equilibrium is the Christian Bale movie.
That's the Christian Bale one. Okay.
Yeah. It reminds me of that. It's the same. Cardassia is obviously a planet where they have huge view screens where people are just speaking propaganda to the masses as they all sort of go about their day. Because we get a lot of view screen stuff where people are talking, you can't really understand what they're saying, but the point of the trial is to send out a message to the population, just a purely propagandistic, the state is always right, the state will always be there, and the state will always protect you message to people, which they've always set up the Cardassians as that way. They are defined as a military dictatorship and everything. I think that this is I don't know, I appreciate the fact that the show 100% goes into it. And it does a little bit of Star Trek tweaking at the end where Odo is putting up a fight about what's going on. And she says, how about you? And the judge is like, how about you respect our judicial process? Like we would be expected to respect yours if we were in your side of the wormhole or whatever. And I think it's a good point. The show is basically kind of making fun of TNG's ethos right there of the moral relativism of everything. Like you can't really judge these other cultures, but you can clearly judge the Cardassian culture, I think, as a wrong. This is not the right way to have a trial.
Yeah, they wouldn't bestow the same latitudes that the Federation would. I mean, the Federation's many times been willing to give people over back to the Cardassians for very last time I was on the show even was a situation when there was exactly that. There was Quark's love interest that was going to be given back to the Cardassians.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
the Federation was all for that. That they have to be in their jurisdiction and all that. But not want to choose another foot. Apparently, maybe be a little more careful about doing that in the future.
Yeah,
because this is how your people are going to get treated. Which is exactly my point, though. Like it's like it doesn't feel like that could exist because you wouldn't be able to have. There's no reason the Federation would give people over to them if Federation people were treated like this by them. you wouldn't have that reciprocity then. So it wouldn't be able to continue like this.
Right. And I think that's I was kind of wondering about that. Like, I think that's just a byproduct of the Star Trek universe, right? Like well, I mean, it's tough to say. Like, Cardassian, you could see Cardassian society existing like this for limited periods of time, really.
Like a couple weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see this.
At least as long as, like, as long as, like, fascist Germany existed and stuff. Like, once maybe if Germany hadn't pushed itself into, like, a bunch of wars trying to take over everything, maybe things would have been different. They'd still be that way today. But I don't know. The Cardassians seem pretty aggressive with their conquering too, and it just, in this like open Starfleet Federation 24th century society, it seems hard to believe that a population could still be propagandized, I guess, the way that the Cardassians managed to do it. And I know that, it's not a realistic show. They're meant to be just a symbol or like an analog for something. And maybe I'd be willing to go and criticize this episode as just saying that maybe they went a little bit too far with it. Like the trial aspect of Cardassia is a little bit absurd on some level. I don't know. I think you have to, in a series that has so many episodes and goes on for so long, I think you have to allow these sort of weird one-off episodes that maybe don't have a big impact on the overall like message or perspective of that race.
But for the second to last episode of the season to be that's crazy.
Okay.
Like, I could see that. I could see this, like, a few episodes back, but then they're like, you're going into the final episode of the season, and it's this kind of episode. It seems like a weird penultimate one.
It does tie in with the Maquis quite nicely, though, which is the two-parter before this, because they mention the Maquis a whole bunch, and they mention
That's true.
They sort of call back to that by having Boone be there and everything.
Let's even get into the plot of that too, because I mean that part of the problem is that it starts off going scene by scene here. It starts off with O'Brien being the most unsympathetic version we've seen him ever. I feel like the guy that doesn't want to go on vacation, workaholic guy, and he doesn't really always seem like that, because he does seem like a kind of guy that will go and spend time with his family. He doesn't seem like he's neglecting them ever. Yeah. He goes and he was playing racquetball in that one episode, so he does take time for himself occasionally. He's not a workaholic. We know that about him. But in this supposition at the beginning, he's a very unsympathetic version of O'Brien. And then he gets into this random conversation with this guy who is doing a very good job of pretending that he knows him, for having never met O'Brien before. I was confused all of a sudden decides to record the conversation for some reason. Like, why is he recording the conversation in the first place? Well, and then O'Brien walks away, and all of a sudden this guy's like should have been like twirling his mustache when O'Brien walked away. I don't understand why they did like a musical stinger where he's all of a sudden, oh, this guy's evil. But we didn't. It just doesn't make any sense why he's all of a sudden evil now.
Well, did we once you finish the story, I was a little bit confused about Boone, whether or not O'Brien ever knew the real Boone, and I think that he did not ever know the real Boone.
Well, it sounds like he. I don't know, because it sounds like they faked his death. Well, they killed him off and they switched him, right? That's the conceit here.
But O'Brien was fighting with him at that battle, right? That set leg 3 or whatever that place is called. I think O'Brien fought there, and that's where the guy got captured. So maybe did he know?
Yeah, I think he met the real guy before he got captured, and then he got captured, and somehow this guy is aware of O'Brien, so he was able to know where what O'Brien would have been at the war and been there enough to fake it. But I think he knew the real one before he died, and this is the fake one pretending to know O'Brien, obviously. But I don't know how he knew to know O'Brien, and I don't know how he knew to record the conversation with O'Brien.
Right.
I don't know that either parts of this.
Right. We don't know if he went to the station seeking out O'Brien or if he just walks around with a
recording everyone.
Yeah, going for anybody.
Just getting whoever he can. I mean, because that seems like his entire intention was to be there to steal the stuff like he wanted to do there.
Yes. Right.
But it doesn't make a lot of sense why he'd be targeting O'Brien. Because, I mean, I don't know. How do you know that he would have access to all this stuff? I mean, yes, he's chief of operations, but how would this guy know O'Brien? Like, how would he know that stuff? Right, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Like, that he would just randomly bump into him.
Is he just stumbling around looking for someone who's like a senior officer, basically, and he's
going to get them? The plan is because they must. It's a big thing. You have to know the inner workings of the security systems on DS9 that, oh, they're going to use voice activation for this, and I can get in with this little piece of thing by doctoring it together, and of course it's going to work. It's a big leap of planning. It's a big leap of heist planning.
So I think we'd have to assume that he was looking for O'Brien at the start because of how complicated
because that's the only way it
was.
works, right?
Yeah. So
he had to know everything, but then he'd have to have like some serious intel about how to get this stuff.
yes,
I don't know.
Yes, you would. You think there might be an easier way to do it than this long con?
Right.
I
mean,
mean,
if they already have all this intel and they just knew O'Brien's voice, you could have just like hung around without even introducing a character that he knows. Unless the whole plan was to frame O'Brien for this thing.
It was,
and
yeah.
That was that was the entire plan here. Okay.
The plan was because the Cardassians needed to sell this to the people as a Federation embarrassment. Basically, that would allow them to, convince the population that the Maquis were illegitimate and everything like that, and that would break apart the treaty that they have. So it was a.
So O'Brien has to take the fall here.
He has to take the fall.
It's all part of it.
It fits in with I think we had talked about it in the Cardassians episode. Like the Cardassians seem to really enjoy long cons. Like they really enjoy very long, detailed plans that are very complicated and could go wrong at a lot of points. But they managed to see it all the way through convincingly. But did you? So how did you feel about the Boone plot at the very end of the episode? Once it's revealed,
it's a terrible Deus Ex Machina kind of like, oh, he's been cosmetically changed and now he looks exactly like a human. I mean, it's not. Is this the first instance we've seen of this happening on the show?
For a Cardassian, maybe, but we've definitely seen cosmetic surgery to change people to look like different species, I guess. So
that's true. I guess we did see that occasionally on Next Generation 2, I suppose.
Yeah, happens on TNG a lot.
Yeah.
And it's probably happened here. I mean, Maritza and Duet had altered himself and stuff. I think that I think the problem with it is just how rapidly it wraps itself up at the very end.
Yeah.
And it's one of those...
Well, it also wraps itself up in a very boring way of explaining the entire plot to us of what happened.
Yes, yeah.
Via a very small conversation between Odo and O'Brien.
Yes.
And it's just a very... I'm honestly, I fell asleep 3 times during that closing. It's like, did I miss something? But I just nodded off like 3 times during it.
But I mean, the problem there is that it's one of those bad storytelling things where the mystery is not really trackable in the B plot. Like the crew on DS9 has to solve what's going on, but the story is really focused on the O'Brien aspect. So you don't spend enough time with the Cisco-led crew trying to figure out what's going on. So they just kind of piecemeal you an answer eventually.
Yeah.
And it culminates in them somehow just getting to Cardassia Prime and the judge recognizing what's going on, and she completely flips, and she does the thing where O'Brien recognizes the error of his ways, so the Cardassians get to walk away by saying that, we found this guy guilty, the system works here, but in our infinite mercy, we're going to let him go. And then to me, it wraps up very much like a TOS episode, or it wraps up like an 80s sitcom or cop show type thing where they get the explanation and everyone just kind of laughs about what they've done.
Yeah.
That to me felt really stupid, and it ends with O'Brien goes on vacation again. He's been going through I think that's really what makes it a comedy, is that he's not impacted by what happened to him in the way that would make sense if it was real life, and he just goes on vacation after that. And I really think it's important to see this as a comedy. I don't think it's particularly funny, but I think it's trying to be a comedy.
It really needed to go. I feel like if they wanted to go that route, and they just wanted to throw it in that direction, they should have gone further with the comedy of it then, and made it more apparent, and made O'Brien a little bit less dramatic even about the whole thing. And
yeah.
I don't know. It plays the drama like drama is the problem, I think. If they would have played it over the top and had this ridiculous situation, I mean, I don't even know. The problem is also the B story of them figuring out what's going on. It's not interesting because we already know what's going on, because we saw the guy twirl his mustache at the very beginning. So so that's the guy.
Yeah. So
we don't really need to know what's going on with them, like decoding this message and stuff like that. I mean, if all this stuff was treated in if all this stuff might have been treated on just completely O'Brien's angle, and they were bringing us information, and we had to piece it together ourselves, what was going on, that might have been interesting. And it still played over the top for laughs too. Maybe, I don't know. That might have worked, and just cut out the whole them investigating thing back on DS9.
I think you can. I think I can actually argue against that. I think that because knowing what's going on from the beginning is a nice thematic mirror to how the Cardassian trials know what the answer is.
That's true too.
We
get to go their route too. Yeah.
So it's kind of a. I don't think that they were aiming for that. I think that they just wanted to. The writers of the show wanted you to know that O'Brien is innocent. I don't. The whole point of the episode is not to go through wondering how O'Brien did or did not do this, or how they're going to prove or disprove his guilt. It's to know that he's innocent of it, and then
he's still an innocent man accused,
right? Push you through it.
I don't know. It's tough because they're still playing for drama. I mean, I don't know if exactly, because we know he's innocent, and we know he's probably going to get out of this fine. So I don't know. It's just I don't know.
Didn't hit you on the right level. It sounds like
it didn't get me. It didn't get me.
No, that's fine. Because I don't think it's a great episode. I think it's fairly solid. I mean, let's see here. I think we pretty much actually talked about everything that I thought about, the things that you would change. I wanted to harp on. I think that the performances are pretty good across the board, and I think that the concept of this is it's very 1984, which I really appreciate. Mm-hmm. Anytime that they can push the Cardassians in a 1984 direction, I think it's the right way to go for them. But I think you also have to take on the level of when you're reading 1984, you don't, at least I don't, spend the time wondering how long that regime could last. Like why do you think that 1984 the regime and I agree with this, like the regime in 1984 seems like it has a staying power that the Cardassians don't. Is it just because the Cardassians interact with people who aren't of that world?
Yeah, because they're not controlling the entire universe. They have to negotiate with people outside of it.
Yeah,
and they've also lost in the past. They've created treaties and that kind of thing to make peace. So it's just I don't think that, given that they have to interact with the outside world, it doesn't quite hold up as well.
Yeah, maybe that is the difference, and that's like the fundamental flaw with the trying to set up a authoritarian how would you describe it? It's not authoritarian. They're authoritarian, but they're like dystopian, I guess, like a dystopian fascist universe or something. And I think that, as you're saying, you need to totally control the information in that world to be effective as a government.
And we have heard of rebels and that kind of thing already happening, and it seems like the way they're setting this up that wouldn't be able to happen the way they're making it look at this in this point.
So would you say that maybe the Cardassians,
or maybe it is,
maybe the Cardassians are actually a little bit closer to somewhere like North Korea in real world?
I think that's a good comparison, possibly.
Yeah, because the population seems like it can break away. They're just under the thumb of the dictatorship.
They're just in it. Yeah, they just fully believe it. They're drinking the Kool-Aid. Like they know it is a cult. Like they're in it. They're fully in it.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe they are more like the Koreans in that. Well, anyway, I think we had a good chat about this episode. I'm going to play an audio clip. Me and Modi are going to come back. We're going to listen to some patron thoughts, and then we're going to get our final thoughts about Tribunal.
Please don't ruin this for me. I'm only a year away from retirement.
We have new evidence to prove O'Brien's innocence.
New evidence?
If O'Brien is accused of stealing warheads from Deep Space Nine, we can prove that he didn't do it.
Of course he did it. He's been found guilty, hasn't he?
Someone manipulated a recording of his voice to gain entry. I can produce that recording here.
No evidence can be submitted after the verdict has been reached. You should know that.
Of course. But I was hoping that the most renowned conservator in all of Cardassia...
You flatter me, sir. You flatter me. But we want justice, not chaos in this court. No, I will have no part of this.
All right, guys. So if you support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, you can leave thoughts about upcoming episodes. They get read on the podcast. We react to it. There's only 2 for Tribunal. So maybe, Modi, that would tend to push me in your direction that maybe it's not a good episode. The episodes that people don't want to talk about are usually the ones that are
forgettable ones.
Yeah, the forgettable ones. But we only have 2, which is interesting. Stephen Cobb says, Tribunal. The prisoner processing scene was good. The camera angles and cuts really helped communicate the confusion that O'Brien was feeling. Keiko's acting was okay at times. It's never great, but there was definitely some passable scenes. It is surprising how quickly Kira and to a lesser degree Dax were willing to assume the worst about O'Brien. I don't think O'Brien's strong feelings about Cardassians was very well established beyond a few one-liners in prior episodes. That lack of rabid Cardassian hatred makes it hard to believe that O'Brien would steal a weapon and risk his life/career. Because of that, it seems like the whole DS9 crew is doing an injustice to O'Brien by even entertaining the possibility that he could have done what he is accused of, except for Odo. He's a suspicious mofo, and him being skeptical is always appropriate. I think I disagree about O'Brien. I think they've really hammered home the fact that he doesn't like Cardassians.
I don't know. I mean, they brought it up at the trial, and they didn't hammer it. They definitely they carefully stepped on it with the conversation with him and Boone, but they didn't go far enough, I feel like, in that conversation to really sell him as completely and utterly hating Cardassians now and never going to trust them again. And it will just go out of his way to kill him if he sees them, kind of thing. It doesn't seem like he's far too diplomatic to have any kind of hatred like that. So we don't ever buy it. And it is like your patron said, that it is odd that Dax and Kira kind of jumped against him immediately. That doesn't seem like it would happen, knowing that they know him so well. That's
interesting. I think I disagree, although I would agree with you that maybe on this episode they didn't set it up well, but if you go back to like TNG's The Wounded, which is where the Cardassians were introduced, O'Brien clearly hates Cardassians in that episode, and that's a different series.
Yeah,
so
I guess given on the history of him, I mean, from what we know from other episodes, in this episode I didn't feel it, but given what we know from him from his past, we do.
Well, I was wondering what the point of that hatred was in this episode. It serves the...
Well, that's the thing too. They don't want him to be suspicious here. They want him to be innocent, clearly innocent, for this to work. And so it could have been a different episode completely if they wanted to play it as maybe O'Brien is suspicious in this case, but they don't really seem to want to go that avenue at all.
Yeah. I think that I know that they bring it up because it seems like a nail in O'Brien's coffin in this Cardassian trial that he doesn't like them, but it doesn't change anything for me because he would still be arming the I guess it just gives a motive. The Cardassians think that gives a motive for him to do this with the Maquis, but it felt like it was just a point that they were trying to hit, and I didn't really understand why it was important, why he needed to hate them. I don't know. It felt a little bit out of place, I guess. Let me see here. The next, second and last comment, Kyle Barrett. Tribunal. Throughout all the torture, wrongful imprisonment, and trial by the Cardassian Judge Judy, all I kept thinking about was why would O'Brien care so much about leaving his holo camera on Deep Space Nine? Couldn't they just replicate one when they got where they're going? Seriously, though, I do feel that this episode deals with the fallout of the Maquis storyline, even if it's just tangential. Or I like the episode that it deals with the fallout. However, I am disappointed that Dukat never appeared. I feel that the episode would have been a bit more effective if Dukat was in Gul Evek's role.
Yeah, I could see that.
You'd agree. I feel like I'm a little bit out on an island with this episode. I would not want Dukat in this episode because I think that because it's a comedy, it would be too confusing to have that character be here. The tone would be wrong, yeah. I think.
He would bring a wrong energy to it, yeah.
Yeah, and just like sort of ping-ponging that character back and forth between super serious and then this goofy trial type thing. I think it's better to have we know Gul Evek, he's been in previous episodes, but he's not as developed as Dukat, so I feel it's good to separate them a little bit there. And just on the level of Dukat can't be everywhere, I guess, if you're trying to make this universe seem like it's a big place, like they have to introduce some other Cardassians, I think. What'd you think of Cardassian Judge Judy, actually?
Was she the same person in the cell when she first meets him? Where she's like, "Oh, we're gonna make you very comfortable here, and
yes.
we want
you
to enjoy it." Okay, that's pretty great. I think she's awesome. That's because I like that because it didn't seem like the same character at all to me. That she once she gets behind the bench, she just kind of turns it on.
Oh, sure.
And then she's like the welcoming hostess at first, and then she had a totally alternative meaning to everything she was saying before, and it kind of just works then.
I think for an episode that relied on a lot of guest actors, I think they were pretty uniformly good. across the board.
Yeah.
There was not one that I was like, oh boy, they really should have improved on that casting there. That was no good. I think that for the three major roles, which would be Boone, the judge, and then the defense lawyer, I think they did a pretty good job of getting everything right there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Let's see. I think that's it. Yeah, there's only the 2 comments for Tribunal, so people don't really seem to care for it. But Modi, how about you give us your rating? I'm interested to hear what you have to say here.
I am going to give it a 2.
Sure.
Because, I mean, and really, I was going to give it a 1 when I first watched it, but reading the part that actually on paper they are funnier to me, and hearing you defend it now, it does maybe make it. I'm willing to concede that maybe I misread it the first time I watched it. So
sure.
I might even watch it again now and then regret and see why did Pensky talk me into this. But
I wouldn't say
I might give it a try.
I wouldn't say it's that good, so I wouldn't rush out.
I'll give it a try in 6 months.
Sure, yeah.
When I forget what it's about.
When we're done with this, I'll give it a 3. I think it's like a right in the middle 3. I think it's perfectly fine. I watched it as a refresher just before we started recording with my wife, and she fell asleep. So I know it's not a particularly riveting episode of Star Trek.
It's a vote of confidence right there.
Right. It's going out to the average Joe. Someone made a comment on YouTube that they were laughing at the fact that we use our wives and girlfriends as like the average Joe metric. Like they're the person that like determines whether or not something is.
I mean, I fell asleep 4 times during this, so it's not that unheard of.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I just personally like that kind of Kafka-esque, goofy, farcical. I don't know if it's satire. Maybe it is more satire than farce, but I like that kind of silly tone, even if it in the larger universe it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I kind of like one-off episodes that do that in Star Trek. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. So I'm going to give it a 3. Modi will give it a 2. Thank you guys very, very much for listening. All the social media links will be there. Discord, Facebook, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. There's a Reddit. There's a subreddit. Click all the links. They're all in the video description of the podcast. You can check out those things there. And I think that's it. Patreon.com/The Pensky File. You want to support the show, that's the best way to do it. And if you don't want to do that on Patreon, why don't you try rating the show on iTunes? That's the next best way to support the show. But thank you very much for listening. Even if you don't do any of the above, it's much appreciated. Modi, thanks very much for coming on.
Anytime.
Do you have anything we want to go out with here where you have some non sequiturs? I don't really have anything planned before we wrap this up.
God of War's pretty great on PS4. I mean,
yeah. Have you
probably one of the best games of the year.
Did you just start playing it, or have you been playing it for a while?
Half. I'm maybe a third of the way through, I think. I got a lot to go, and I don't get a lot of time to play games that aren't on the channel. Yeah. So, but I've loved what I've played of it so far. It is pretty amazing. Interesting.
I'll have to give it a whirl, I think. I'm playing through, what the hell am I doing? Final Fantasy VII with the mods, which is interesting. Nice. I've never done that before. There is a retranslation mod. There's someone who took like 6 years out of his life and retranslated the FF7 story. And I would highly recommend, if you like those games, I would play it with that mod. It is remarkable how badly localized that game was. I know that everyone knows that it was badly localized, but it makes no sense when you read the original translation and then you read what the sort of like redone, relocalized translation is. Everything seems much clearer. It's not as much of a mystery as I thought FF7 actually was. It's actually kind of cut and dry what's going on. I think that's it. Check out God of War. Check out the Be a Cause mod for FF7. Modi, thank you very much for coming on.
No problem.
We will be back with the Jem'Hadar, which is the season finale for Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2. So, we'll see you then.